Greetings and salutations. This is Thaddeus, High Priest from Tourmaline Grove. It's been a long time since I've been on Facebook Live, so this is going to be like an update video and a book review. I'll try to keep the book review short. I know I can go on and stuff. And a couple product placements. I'm not getting paid for any of this. I hope this finds everybody well and good. And I hope you've been enjoying your year and your Sabbaths. And the last full moon, which was in Pisces yesterday, which we did a little ceremony from out of one of our new books. That was really exciting and good. Another little update is we do have a website now. It's tourmalinegrove.com. That's tourmaline like the stone, grove like in a grove of trees.com. And we also can be found on Meetup group in Houston under Houston Traditional Witchcraft. So the Houston Traditional Witchcraft Meetup group is affiliated with Tourmaline Grove. Just waiting for my coals to heat up so I can put some of this new incense on. Enjoying some 2019 Malbec. So, the incense I'll be using today is Holy Santo, and it's yarrow. Yarrow is used for love spells, but it's also used for communication, clear communication, courage, and psychic abilities. As always, feel free to add into the conversation if you'd like, or send me any questions or any topics you'd like me to discuss. I'm looking at all these little settings real quick here. Alright, so the first book I'm going to review is Folk Witchcraft, A Guide to Lore, Land, and Familiar Spirits for the Solitary Practitioner by Roger J. Horn. This is what it looks like. I'm not a huge fan of books that have the title Solitary on them because since Cunningham wrote many books in the 90s, Scott Cunningham that is, he pretty much solidified all you need to know about solitary practicing in his book. So that's to say that a lot of people are derivative off of this book. However, this one was extremely unique. It says, complete with personal practices, in-depth descriptions, and craft theories, models, and hand-drawn illustrations. The author's working grimoire, Folk Witchcraft, provides the student with a thorough introduction to old craft, firmly rooted in the past, but adapted to the present. And I would totally agree with that. This book is really good. So much as to say, knock on wood, if there was another hurricane, this would be one of the 3 books that I probably would grab. It's a relatively a new phenomenon, traditional witchcraft being a thing, or a subsect of I guess, paganism. And with sometimes called modern traditional witchcraft, but traditional witchcraft and modern traditional witchcraft, and another book we'll go to, which is called folk witchcraft. Either way, they're brand new kids on the scene. So you have to be kind of careful when it's under that particular genre, because it varies so much, it swings so widely, because there's no sense of like cohesion or authority on that, because it's a brand new genre. Wicca has its authority. It can trace its lineage. It can say this is this and this is Wicca and this is not Wicca. many of the African diaspora traditions, Yakumi, Lukumi, Voodoo, Voodoo, all the other African spiritualities, Palamambe, they have a distinct lineage in the sense of a cohesive tradition. So yes, you innovate and everything changes, because that's one of the rules of magic. All the world has changed, right? The seasons show us that. But there's kind of a, what do I want to say, a reference point. So if somebody goes way out to the left, they're like, oh, that's not the magic. It's not that cohesive when it comes to what's considered folk magic now and what's considered, and I air quote that, I'll get to the reason why I say that, folk magic now and traditional witchcraft. So you got to be very particular. So I would recommend that there is an exhaustive amount of YouTube videos on book reviews on almost every single book with the occult, but look up some of these books before you get them, and look up a couple of videos, because people will give you different opinions on them before you purchase them. And people go, oh, well, you know, if I don't buy it and it stays on my shelf, that's fine. But what people forget, especially in witchcraft, is that money is magic, right? Money is energy, right? So magic is energy. So really what you spend your money on, whether or not you read it, you're investing your energy, right? So it's better to have 3 books that you've read 100 times than have an exhaustive library of 200 books that you've never even opened the pages, you know, because that becomes a bit of pseudo-intellectualism, right? I grew up with academia. Both of my parents are college professors, particularly my mother's an English professor. And a funny little true fact that you can look up is when you become a teacher and you move into your office, and this particularly happens usually when you become tenure, right? So when you're like signed on for good, right? The department chair will furnish your office not just with furniture, but there's companies that will literally just give you a library to fill up your bookshelves. You never read any of the books, you just order a package and they give you like 30-some books. So people come in your office and you're like, wow, that's a massive library, you're well read, you can buy that. It's nonsense, you don't even have, you can just pick. You can pick the classics, you can pick whatever you want. They have it like science teacher books. So that's not your money. I'm saying that you're spending the department's money, but you're tied to where you put your energy in, so you really should read the books. And especially as witches, book reading is a huge thing for us, because in the European history, literacy was kept only to the Catholic Church. You weren't allowed to read. Most knights and kings and some monarchs didn't know how to read. So if you got caught reading any book, it was heresy and you could be burned at the stake. So literacy is a huge part of traditional witchcraft if you look into any of the files. I mean, that's why we have a Book of Shadows. I mean, literacy is a huge thing for us. So just pick your books well. Don't try to compete with other pagans or other witches you know about, like how many books I have, right? Just actually read your books and actually put some energy into where your money's spent. So this one is fantastic. Just a little synopsis of what you'll learn. Mastering ecstatic methods in spirit flight, described in Old Witch lore. Celebrating the turning of the seasons with traditional rituals. Cultivating closer relationships with nature spirits, which this one's really good about that one. Working with powerful traditional charms. Experiencing shape-shifting into various spirit forms. And interpret incantations, charms, and sigils received from your familiar spirits. He goes really, really good into working with your familiar spirits as a solitaire, which a lot of books talk about, but they don't go into detail on how to actually do that. And he goes really deep into spirit flight too, which if anybody doesn't know what spirit flight is, it's the same as sabbatical witchcraft, meaning that in like the movie The Witch, the stories, they always met at the Sabbath, right? Out in the woods naked with the bonfire, and then they flew on the broomstick to meet in some other place with the witch lord, and they came back. So sabbatical witchcraft and hedge witchery, okay, hedge witch is just a different term for astral projection, okay? Or lucid dreaming, right? So you're doing your magic in lucid dreaming, and you're doing your magic on the astral plane, and then you're bringing it back down to the earth, right? So witches didn't actually fly, right? A lot of the flying ointments that they were notorious for using, right, were actually psychoactive plants and herbs put together so that when you fell asleep or when you went into trance, you'd have hallucinations. I guess we technically call them hallucinations, but astral projections is what it is. And some people go, well, that doesn't really count as witchcraft, and if you don't really do your spell here, I would argue try it, because there's a lot of magic that I've done on the astral plane that has literally manifested in the real world. There's a whole, it's an amazing thing. But for a solitary guide, this one is really, 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 really good. So I recommend this book. And it's very small. You can take it with you. It's super easy. So the next one is by one of my favorite authors. Who I've liked for a long time. And I stumbled upon him on Amazon Kindle. And some incense here. And his name is Ball Cadmar. And he writes very little books that are real short reads, but they're genius. So this one, if everybody can see that. Baal, the Lord of Heavens, calling down the great God of Canaan. So, a little history for those who don't know, because I know everybody's pretty much atheist now. Baal is mentioned in the Bible a couple times. So, it's been proven without a doubt, genetically and historically, that the Israelites, the people of Israel, the Jews, who identify coming from Israel, their original tribe was Canaan, right? Let me just spell that so C-A-N-A-A-N, right? There was a group of them who broke off and started their own religion, which is the religion of Yahweh, which became the Old Testament, right? And then they fought the Canaanites to get some land, but they're originally Canaanites, okay? Are you following me with that, okay? They're originally part of the same Semitic people, right? One tribe kind of broke off. So to say this, the pagan religion of the Middle East before Judaism, Christianity, which never really stuck in the Middle East, and Islam took over, right, was the Canaanite religion. They were a huge, huge group of people. And Baal was actually their storm god. God of fertility and God of weather. We always put those two together because for the longest time, mankind was agrarian, meaning that we had to get our food either from hunting or we had to get it from the land. Farming changed our whole civilization because you could have a stockpile of food. Before, we were starving and went months without eating and had to follow animals around for the hunting pattern, right? When we learned to domesticate plants and do agriculture, we could stay in one place and have a surplus of food, which allowed us to build permanent settlements, gave us some food in our tummy so we could start reading books and doing literature and poetry. It changed the whole world. So that's usually why the agriculture gods tend to be the highest in the pantheons, right? And agriculture is tied to the weather. So if it doesn't rain, then the crops will dry out and it's a drought and you die. So agriculture and weather gods have always kind of been put together, right? So he was originally, the Canaanite god of fertility and weather. However, in the Bible, they talk very, 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 very bad about him to where people believe that he was some kind of demon. He wasn't a demon, and I'll get to that later because I'm going to talk about a book that has to do, well, I might not do it in this review, but in the Goetia, he's one of the demons in the Goetia. But they talk really bad about him in the Bible. But what we have to understand in context is when one religion shows up and push out an old religion, the gods of the old religion become the demons, right? And then a new religion comes, and then that's the demons. And then a new religion comes, and the old gods the demons. Like, that's just how it goes, right? But this one, he covers the history of Baal in depth, various aspects and forms, his worship and pervasiveness throughout the biblical writings, overview of the Baal cycle and why Baal is incorrectly equated with the devil and evil in the West. And the references of Baal is most obvious to the least and why they get it wrong. But his whole thing is with a lot of his books, he has mastered the art of condensing pagan worship for some of these deities into use of the epitaphs. I don't know if you're aware with what epitaphs is. So in paganism, there were gods, and it was like, it's an attribute of a god, right? And I almost said something, but I don't want to get like terrorist threats, so I'm not going to say that, because I was formerly Islamic, and there's a very close parallel. And there's a close parallel with the Jews when it comes to Kabbalah and the 72 names of God. So it's saying that each of these names have a special, let's say, a magical power, right? So if you want something specifically from the deity, you've got to find out which one of those names, and you can chant it. In Hindu, they do it all the time. Shiva has like 106 some names, right? But depending on what you want, the Hindu priest will tell you, chant this one 3 times and that 4 times. Or if you're Catholic, 3 Hail Marys and 1 Our Father, right? It's that kind of concept. But it makes it very powerful because you tune in to a specific frequency, and then you get what you want from it. And the most clever thing was this. A lot of the ancient gods, especially the gods of the Middle East, demanded some kind of a sacrifice, food sacrifice, some kind of like living sacrifice, right? So for those who are squeamish and don't want to give a bit of blood, he's so clever in this is that you can use an egg, which is what we use, or like a regular egg, like a white egg, and you break the egg and you put it in his offering glass, because when you think about it, the egg has the potential to grow up to be a chicken. So you're really sacrificing an entire chicken by leaving out the egg to him. So that keeps it from bloodying up your house and chicken feathers everywhere and animal cruelty and all that kind of stuff. You can also use, sometimes for special occasions, we go to the store, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's, I think they use it for stews, but they have the little packet of like the ham that's in cubes, not the big one that you use for stews, but they have little ones, or turkey in cubes, and we use that out too. However, we have a dog, so the dog likes to kind of, if he smells like meat being left out, he's going to try to get at it. I don't need him knocking over my altar. So we just use an egg. Plain and simple, go to Costco, you can get 24 eggs for like $7. And that's worked with other deities that demand those kinds of attributes. So we have a little cup, and we just crack the egg, and you leave it for 24 hours, and then you go put it outside, or if you have plants, you can fertilize the plant with it. But it's absolutely brilliant that he came up with that. And you chant the certain attribute name, right, the certain title rather, to get what you want. And you can use a coin, or not coin, but you can use a witch's ladder, or a I don't know what the English word for it is, but like a rosary, right, to get that done. He's got a lot of books. He has one on Lakshmi, he has one on Shiva, he's got like several, and they're really short reads, and he always is really good about referencing what he wants to do, referencing the history of whoever he's engaging with. We use our Baphomet statue as a representation of Baal, which is also what they use in many Luciferian sects. There's an argument whether or not Baphomet and Baal was the same deity. However, in most of traditional witchcraft, you see the goat god, which is made his way into Wicca. Goats and bulls are relatively close to the same. Almost every single deity that was ever depicted in ancient history, at least in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, as a bull also has a goat form, right? So people can argue over them being different species, but they're almost quite the same. They're usually interchangeable, is what I'm saying. The next one I'll get to is, let's see, that one last. Is the Cloverstone Workings, a manual for early modern witchcraft by Robert Addison, and illustrations by Molly McHenry. And I will tell you what it says on the back. A return to the dark roots of witchcraft. And mind you, it says dark roots, right? Cloverstone Working is a study in the history of witchcraft from Scotland and England during the height of the witch hunts in the 16th to 18th century. The The folklore of witchcraft and the precious information gleaned from the witch trial reports related occult phenomenon and published accounts of early modern era examined and a strange yet grounded vision of the reality of historical witchcraft emerges. Taking the informative sources and powerful aesthetics they reveal as it's a starting point, this book presents a complete working manual for people who might attempt to bring the uncanny power of historical witchcraft back to life in hidden spaces of their own minds and their souls. Instructions for obtaining the hallowed witches' dreams, whereby men and women became capable of preternatural feats, are given along with detailed instructions and explanations from many potent works of sorcery which emerge from the lore of the early modern witchcraft. This book is a triumph. A triumph. Let me reiterate that. A triumph in the idea of modern traditional witchcraft. Meaning this. A lot of books that you'll get in that genre now will give you references, but they don't know how to take the historical references and reenact it in a way that it's practical for an actual ritual, right? So basically you're just reading a witchcraft history book, right? And there's arguments over, how much we can take because it was under torture and all that, and I've been on both sides of those arguments. Cloverstone Working is no joke. He really, really has a gift for research and how to translate that research into a practical application of a modern ritual. It's very dark. I have no problem with that. I'm not scared of the dark. It's my opinion that witchcraft is supposed to be like sexy and spooky, but that's just my opinion. Not many people agree with that. I think it's genius. I mean, I don't even want to give any spoiler alerts. It's so good. And the sigils he has in it, he researched, and you can use them for astral projection amongst many other things. The Cloverstone Working is mind-boggling. You can do it together as a group, and you can do it by yourself, but it's one of the best books on the subject in a really, really long time. And the illustrations are absolutely amazing. There's just so much about this book that I adore. It's just so great. It's so great. All right, and on to this tome of a work, New World Witchcraft. What does it say? A trove of American folk magic. All right, so very heavy book, very enlightening, fascinating if you love witchcraft as a subject. And he took folklore from all over the place. He actually is on a couple of podcasts, the author, and he's very articulate, and it's got spells thrown in here all over the place. My only issue with folklore, American folk magic, right, is that it seems to be that the new phenomenon of YouTubers and how do I want to say it? Millennial witches with claiming folk magic, right? American folk magic. It's basically a reaction to hoodoo, right? So hoodoo's been practiced, southern root work and conjure and Appalachian magics. The history of it's been practiced by a wide variety of people. But because of modern cancel culture and everything being cultural appropriation, younger people are afraid to practice hoodoo, so they rebranded it as American folk magic, so they don't feel like they can't be blamed for cultural appropriation, basically. Because there's a handful of YouTubers who are African American descent, who will start their YouTube by saying, "Oh, this ain't for you. If you're not black, then you can't do hoodoo." Total nonsense. Historically, completely inaccurate. They Googled hoodoo for like 10 minutes, and then they think that it's like some Black Power movement shit, and it's not. It's like so not true. So, in response to being hypersensitive to cancel culture, now a lot of people who would have been practicing hoodoo are rebranding it as American folk magic. But it's basically hoodoo. Because all the sources you get for that is Appalachian magic, and Appalachian magic and hoodoo are almost one and the same. So there's no getting around it. You know what I'm saying? Call a spade, but I know nowadays we can't do that. That's my only issue with that, and he kind of goes into depth about this. So they're making themselves a safe space. So folk magic, I don't know. And I think also now some of that is bleeding over to traditional witchcraft because people are kind of spooked out by traditional witchcraft, so they're starting to call it folk, right? It's kind of like folk music, right? Anytime it doesn't fit in a particular genre, they're like, oh, he's a folk musician. Okay, I guess. I don't know. I see it for what it is. I see the forest for the trees, what they're kind of trying to do there, right? So that term folk we use very loosely. However, this book is like, I mean, if you really have to like the history of witchcraft and why we do what we do. It has spells in it too, but it's not as easy to sort through as like maybe the Cloverfield working or folk witchcraft. Or folk witchcraft? Yeah, folk witchcraft. But it's really, really good. I think it should be on everybody's shelf. It's actually really good as a starter if you're used to, if you're into any of the traditions such as Southern root word and conjure, hoodoo, Appalachia, generic folk magic, like your area kind of magic. And what traditional means is the difference between that and say like Wicca, right? Is that folk magic and traditional magic takes into account where you're living now, where you're from. See, so the problem with Wicca was it started in Great Britain, and we don't have the same seasons, we don't have the same landscape, and we don't have Stonehenge and that. Folk magic, for instance, in Texas, where I'm now, is going to be completely different than folk magic when I was in Illinois. Two different environments, two different seasons. Illinois, we get all 4 seasons. Texas, we get a hot season and a rainy season. Different ethnicities in Illinois, predominantly kind of Celtic farmers moved to where I was in the middle of the area, and you go a little bit farther south and it's German, and we have Amish population, so we're going to have all that kind of mixed in with the land, right? Here in Houston, heavily Hispanic, heavily African American, heavily West African, right? So it's not uncommon to find voodoo priestesses who have been initiated in Louisiana and in parts of Texas, and they're white women in their 40s. And I take them to Illinois, and people would be like, you can't do that. That's not a thing. You can't do that. She's vouched for it. She has lineage. There's plenty of kids who are mixed race here who are also part Bruja or part Yakumi and then part something else, because that's just how it is. We also have the bayous. We have different temperature, different animals down here, different history of Native American culture down here as opposed to in Illinois, right? So you have to really be one with the land, which I like because I always thought that we are a earth-based faith. So you can't claim to be an earth-based faith and then be the person who's like allergic to grass and I don't like insects and it's too hot outside and I never go camping and that kind of stuff. It's not supposed to be. Witchcraft is a practice, it's not a theory, right? So that's kind of like what makes it different, right? It's a good book. Corey Thomas Hutchison, he does a lot of blogs, or he does not blogs, podcasts, and they're actually recorded on YouTube, and they're really good. And then my last one, which is really, really good, is Speed Learning Cartomancy. So Cartomancy, and Julian Moore, I took one of her classes on, I believe she has it on Udemy still, on Cartomancy. It was genius. But this speed learning version is the best way to just master Cartomancy. It's so genius. The exercises are genius. You go one by one. You have to have an extra deck of cards because you need to write things out on the cards so you can use the cards themselves. It's kind of like flashcards. And it's only 13 chapters, 86 pages. You can go through it so fast. But she teaches you spread. She teaches you how to really, truly get familiar with the cards. And she breaks it down in a very clever sort of way to where once you get it, then from then on, you're going to get it. Cartomancy is one of the oldest forms of divination. It was before tarot. Tarot wasn't used for divination. If you know anything about ceremonial magic and Egyptians, tarot is a pictorial depiction of the different levels of initiation to masterhood from a magician. It wasn't meant to tell your future. I'm going to tell you straight up, tarot was not meant to that. The gypsies started doing that to take money from Europeans. And they'll even admit that. They're like, yeah, we only did that to take it from you. However, the playing cards have been used for centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries as a form of divination that is pretty straightforward. There's very little ambiguity with the playing cards. So you're not going to pull over an ace of spades and have like 9 different definitions of what it could be. I mean, it'll tell you. It'll tell you. It's a lot like the dominoes. You might not want to hear what they're going to tell you, but they'll definitely definitively tell you. And divination is one of the few gifts that we do have as witches that we can go out in the world and actually apply for change and betterment in our lives, right? So remember that magic is the art and science of making reality conform to will. So if you don't know what you want, then reality is not going to be able to help you, right? So you need to have a will. You need to be very directed and very intentional in the things that you do, right? And then magic will help you. It's not an aesthetic. It's not a plaything. It's not a hobby. It's not like a cool thought experiment. Like magic is some serious stuff. So if you're not intending to use magic, then don't do magic. Just do some other aesthetic, like I don't know, like goth or something else or cosplay, but just stay out of the magic room because you're going to do more harm to yourself than you're going to do good. But cardomancy, and you can get playing cards anywhere. In fact, you can go to Walgreens and get oversized playing cards for like $2. Let me show you what I mean by that. And I use these oversized playing cards as like flashcards, right? So I can learn better. But I have several decks on hand that I actually can carry with me to do cardomancy. So in conclusion, that's my little quick book review. I haven't been on here for a while. Please check us out if you're in the Houston area at the Houston Traditional Witchcraft Meetup Group. So we have pool parties, we have full moons, we do all kinds of stuff. And then check us out at www.tourmalinegrove.com. I'm soon going to have a price list up for our services, which are divination and spell work and all that kind of stuff. I'm working on that. I changed my career, so I've had to put some other things in order real quick. But with that said, please share this and like and help to share this with your friends. Any questions or anything, feel free to send me a message on the topic you want me to discuss. And salutations and farewell.